It was the summer of 1972. I was 25 years old, and I was spending 2 weeks in Cape Cod with my husband of 2 years. My name is Dorothy. I am 74 years old now. I am holding a small white shell. It sits on my nightstand, has been there for 52 years. My husband never asked where it came from. He died 3 years ago. A good man, a kind man, but there are parts of me he never knew existed. What happened in those 2 weeks in July changed something in me that never changed back. I was a young wife doing what young wives were supposed to do, following my husband to a rented cottage by the sea, being grateful, being good, being quiet. I met someone. His name was Gene, and for 14 days I remembered who I was before I became who I was supposed to be. I have never told this story to anyone, not to my children, not to my closest friends, not even in my own diary. Some stories live in silence for so long they begin to hurt. This is one of them. I think it is time. The cottage was small and white, with blue shutters that needed paint. It sat 3 houses back from the water, close enough to hear the waves at night, far enough that you had to walk to see them. We had rented it for 2 weeks in July, our first real vacation as a married couple. My husband was Robert. He was 31, an accountant, steady as sunrise. He brought his work with him to Cape Cod. Papers spread across the small kitchen table, calculator clicking away while the ocean called just outside. He said it was important. He said he was building our future. I was 25 and I felt ancient. I had been married for 2 years, and I was already disappearing. Not in a dramatic way, in the quiet way that women disappeared then, a little less of myself each day until I was not sure what was left underneath all the being good. The air in Cape Cod smelled like salt and pine and something else, something like possibility. The cottage was surrounded by scrub oaks and beach roses, and when the wind came off the water it carried the sound of gulls and fishing boats and summer people calling to each other across porches. I would wake early and walk to the beach while Robert worked. The sand was cool under my bare feet at 7 in the morning, empty except for sandpipers and the occasional jogger. I would sit on a piece of driftwood and watch the sun climb higher, turning the water from gray to blue to something that had no name. I was not unhappy, exactly. I was just not anything. And then, on the 4th day, I found the little bookstore in town. It was tucked between a fish market and a shop that sold seashells to tourists. Narrow and deep, with books stacked floor to ceiling, and a gray cat sleeping in the window. The smell of old paper and coffee. I pushed open the door and heard a bell chime somewhere in the back. I was browsing the poetry section when I heard the accent. French, but speaking English. Soft around the edges, like water over stones. He was talking to the woman behind the counter about special orders, something about a book he needed shipped to France. I noticed him before I even knew I had noticed. The way he moved his hands when he spoke, the careful way he chose his English words, as if he were selecting fruit at a market. He was maybe 32, 33, dark hair that needed cutting, white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. He held himself like someone comfortable in his own skin, which was something I had forgotten how to be. I was holding a slim volume of Colette, in French. I could read some French then, not well, but enough to stumble through a page or two. "Ah," he said, appearing beside me so quietly I startled. "Colette, you read French." His voice was like warm honey. The way he said French with that soft sound, like a whisper. "A little," I said. "I studied it in college." He smiled, the kind of smile that reaches the eyes first. "She writes about love the way most people write about weather, like it is something that simply happens, beyond control." I had been holding my breath without realizing it. "Would you like me to read you something?" he asked, gesturing to the book in my hands. I should have said no. I should have made an excuse and walked away. I should have remembered that I was Mistress Robert Thompson, that my husband was waiting for me back at the cottage with his papers and his plans for our future. Instead, I said yes. He opened the book and found a passage. Read it aloud in French first, then translated. Something about how love arrives like weather, sudden and without warning, changing everything. My name is Jean, he said when he finished. Dorothy, I said, but the way he repeated it back to me, Dorothy, made it sound like someone else's name entirely. Someone braver than I was. I found out later that he was in Cape Cod for business. Something to do with importing wines from small vineyards in France. He was staying at the inn near the harbor for 10 days. 10 days that happened to overlap with mine. We talked about books, about the difference between French and American summers, about small things that felt enormous, the way strangers can, sometimes, when they know they will not be strangers for long. When I left the bookstore that day, I walked back to the cottage in a daze. Robert asked where I had been. I said I had been to town. It was the truth, but it felt like a lie. That night, lying next to my husband while he slept, I stared at the ceiling and listened to the waves. I told myself it was nothing, a conversation in a bookstore, perfectly innocent. But I knew, even then, that I would go back. I remember fragments now, not whole days. Memory is strange that way. It keeps the moments that mattered and lets the rest blur together. I remember the second time I saw him. I had walked to the beach early, as usual. He was there, sitting on my piece of driftwood, watching the sunrise. I hoped I might see you again, he said, as if we had planned to meet. We talked for an hour, about nothing, about everything. He told me about his village in France, about his grandmother who taught him to cook. I told him about growing up in Ohio, about how I had always dreamed of living by the ocean. And now you do, he said. For 2 weeks, I said. Sometimes 2 weeks is enough to change everything, he said. I remember the afternoon he taught me to skip stones. We were on a quieter stretch of beach, away from the families with their umbrellas and sand castles. He showed me how to choose the right stone, flat and smooth, how to hold it, how to throw it almost sideways so it would dance across the water. Like this, he said, standing behind me, guiding my arm, his hand covering mine for just a moment. Feel the weight of it. Let the stone do the work. My first throw sank immediately. He laughed, not mocking, but delighted. Try again, he said. The ocean is patient. I remember the little cafe where we would sit in the afternoons while Robert worked. Jean would order coffee. I would order tea. We would sit outside under the striped umbrellas and watch the summer people walking by with their shopping bags and their sunburned children. He would tell me about France, about the light there in the mornings, about the way the grapes looked when they were almost ready for harvest. I would tell him about my life, or the parts of it that felt safe to tell. My job before I married, teaching second grade, the children I wanted to have someday, the books I had read but never discussed with anyone. You have sad eyes, he said one afternoon, completely without warning. Do I asked, like someone who has forgotten how to want things. He said. I did not know how to answer that, because it was true. I remember the shells. He was always finding them, small perfect ones, that most people would walk right past. He would rinse them in the waves and hand them to me. For your collection, he would say, even though I had never said I collected shells. But I kept them, every one, in a small paper bag that I hid in my suitcase. There was one shell, smaller than the others, white and smooth as porcelain. He found it on our last day together, though we did not know then that it would be our last. This one, he said, turning it over in his palm, looks like it holds secrets, like you. I remember the weight of his hand when he placed it in mine. the way his fingers lingered for just a moment longer than necessary. "What secrets do you think it holds?" I asked. "The same ones you do," he said quietly. That night, lying next to Robert, I held the shell and wondered what Jean saw in me that my own husband had never noticed. What secrets I carried that even I was not aware of. Robert was beginning to notice my absences. Not suspiciously, but the way a man notices when his routine is disturbed. "You have been walking a lot," he said one morning over breakfast. "The beach is beautiful." I said, "I like the exercise. Maybe I should join you sometime." He said, "You have work." I said quickly, too quickly. He looked at me for a moment, coffee cup halfway to his lips. "The work can wait," he said. But it never did wait. By the time he finished his calculations and folded his papers, I would be back from my walks, helping him plan our evening or our next day. Being the wife I was supposed to be, Jean mentioned, casually, that he would be leaving soon. His business was nearly finished. He had a flight back to Paris the following week. "Will you miss it?" I asked. "Cape Cod? I will miss some things about it," he said, looking directly at me. We were sitting on the rocks near the lighthouse, watching the sunset. The sky was pink and orange and purple, like something from a postcard. Beautiful in the way that makes you ache. "What will you do when you go home?" I asked. "Return to my life," he said. "And you?" "Return to mine," I said. "And are you happy with your life, Dorothy?" No one had ever asked me that question. Not my parents, not my husband, not even myself. "I think so," I said. "You think so." I watched the waves rolling in, one after another, endless. "I am supposed to be happy," I said. "That is not the same thing," he said gently. I knew that Robert was a good man. I knew that I had a good life, a house with a garden, a husband who provided for me, plans for children, and a future that looked exactly like everyone else's future. But sitting there with Jean, watching the sun disappear into the ocean, I felt like someone waking up from a long sleep, like I had been holding my breath for 2 years and had finally remembered how to exhale. "What if things were different?" I asked quietly. "Different how? What if I was not married? What if you lived here instead of France? What if we had met 5 years ago?" He was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was very soft. "We cannot live in what if, Dorothy. We can only live in what is. But for those 2 weeks in July, what is felt like enough?" The last morning came too quickly. I woke before dawn and walked to the beach, hoping to see the sunrise one more time before we packed the car and drove back to our real lives. Jean was there, sitting on our piece of driftwood, as if he had been waiting for me. "I wanted to say good-bye," he said. "I know," I said. We sat together watching the sky turn from black to gray to pink. The waves were gentle that morning, lapping at the shore like whispers. "I have something for you," he said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small white shell, the one he had found the day before, the one that held secrets. "So you will remember," he said. "I will not forget," I said. "Promise me something," he said, turning to face me. "Promise me you will not let yourself disappear completely." I did not understand what he meant then. I do now. He kissed me once, very softly, on the forehead, like a blessing. "Goodbye, Dorothy," he said. "Goodbye, Jean." I watched him walk away down the beach, his hands in his pockets, getting smaller and smaller until he disappeared around the bend. Then I sat there until the sun was fully up and the first joggers began to appear. When I got back to the cottage, Robert was awake, packing his papers into his briefcase. "Ready to head home?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "I am ready." We drove back to Ohio that afternoon. Robert talked about his work, about the projects waiting for him at the office. I sat in the passenger seat, the small white shell in my pocket, watching Cape Cod disappear in the rearview mirror. I had a good life after that. Robert and I had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. I went back to teaching when they were older. We bought a bigger house, took family vacations, celebrated anniversaries and birthdays and graduations. Robert was a good father, a good provider, a good man. When he died 3 years ago, I grieved for him honestly. 49 years of marriage, of shared history, of building a life together. But I never told him about Jean. I never told him about the 2 weeks when I remembered who I was before I became someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's everything except myself. I kept the shell, first in my jewelry box, then in the drawer of my nightstand, and finally, after Robert died, on top of the nightstand where I could see it. My daughter found it when she was helping me reorganize after the funeral. "What is this, Mom?" she asked. "Just a shell I found once," I said. She held it up to the light, the way Jean had done 52 years ago. "It is beautiful," she said. "Where did you find it?" "Cape Cod," I said. "A long time ago." "I did not know you and Dad ever went to Cape Cod," she said. "Once," I said. "Just once." She set it back down gently and moved on to other things. But I caught her looking at it again, as if she knew there was more to the story. Maybe there always is. Last month my granddaughter came to visit. She is 24, just a year younger than I was that summer. She has the same restless energy I remember having, the same way of looking out windows as if she is searching for something she cannot name. We were sitting in my garden, drinking iced tea, when she asked me a question that stopped my heart. "Grandma," she said, "did you ever have any regrets?" I looked at her young face, so serious, so full of possibility, and I thought about all the ways I could answer that question. "I lived a good life," I told her. "Your grandfather was a wonderful man. I had 3 beautiful children who became 3 beautiful adults. I have 7 grandchildren who bring me joy every day." "But that is not what I asked," she said gently. "She is smart, my granddaughter, too smart to accept easy answers. What do you think I should regret?" I asked her. "I do not know," she said. "But sometimes you get this look, like you are somewhere else entirely, like you are remembering something beautiful and sad at the same time. I had no idea that anyone could see that in me." "Every one has places they go in their minds," I said. "Memories that feel more real than the present sometimes." "Tell me about one," she said. "Some day," I said, "when you are older." "I am 24, Grandma." "How much older do I need to be?" I laughed. "Old enough to understand that some stories do not have happy endings. Old enough to know that sometimes the most important thing that happens to you lasts only 2 weeks and changes everything." She leaned forward, interested now. "But I was not ready then. Maybe I am now. Jean taught me that I was capable of feeling things I did not know I could feel, that there was a version of me that existed underneath all the expectations and obligations and careful choices. For 2 weeks I was not Mistress Robert Thompson, good wife and future mother. I was just Dorothy, a woman who could skip stones and read French poetry and sit on a beach at sunrise with a man who saw her as someone worth seeing. I do not regret my life. I had love with Robert, different but real. I had children who brought me purpose and joy. I had a career that mattered to me. I had friendships and travels and moments of genuine happiness. But I do carry something from that summer. Not regret, exactly. More like a small, sweet ache, a reminder of who I was when I was most myself. Sometimes, even now, I smell salt air and I am 25 again, walking on a beach at dawn with sand between my toes and possibility in my pocket. Sometimes I wonder what happened to Jean, whether he married, whether he had children, whether he ever thought about those 2 weeks in July when he met a young American woman who was just beginning to understand that she was disappearing. Sometimes I imagine meeting him now, two old people with gray hair and lined faces, sitting in a cafe somewhere and marveling at how young we once were. But mostly I just hold the shell and remember. My granddaughter will inherit it some day. Maybe she will ask where it came from. Maybe I will tell her. Maybe she will understand that some treasures are not valuable because of what they are, but because of what they remember. Have you ever loved someone you could not keep? Not the grand, dramatic kind of love that novels are written about, but the quiet kind that slips into your life like morning light and changes the color of everything. If you have, you know what I mean when I say that some loves are not meant to become lives. They are meant to become memories. And sometimes, if we are very lucky, those memories are enough to remind us of who we are underneath everything we have become. His name was Gene. For 14 days in July of 1972, I remembered who I was before I became who I was supposed to be. The shell sits on my nightstand now, white and smooth and full of secrets. And sometimes, when the light is just right, I can still hear him saying my name the way no one ever has since. If this story found something in you, I would love to know. Tell me in the comments, what summer do you still carry with you?